Okay, welcome everyone. You have found your way to the Bucks County Short Fiction Contest celebration. Tonight we are honoring Matthew Omer, Joseph McCain, and Barbara Beck. And we also have our final judge with us, Kylie Reed. We are delighted to have you all with us. Folks who are watching us are on YouTube, so you can see us, but we can't see you. If that's any comfort, that's how it's working. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the contest and how it began. Then I'm going to chat briefly with each of the writers who has won. Kylie will tell you a little bit about what resonated with her for each story, and we'll have each of the writers read a 5 to 7 minute segment of their story. After that, we have a treat for you. Kylie's going to talk about entering writing contests and what her experiences have been with that, and she may have some helpful hints for you as well. We're going to try to keep the whole program to about an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. As a professor, I know that Zoom fatigue is a real thing, so we will try to keep your focus and give you a little bit of culture and a little bit of fun and something interesting tonight to think about. So, my name is Elizabeth Luciano. I am an associate professor at the college, and the contest began about 4 years ago. The college kindly granted me a sabbatical and quite reasonably felt that I should do some work during this time. So since the college had a long history of supporting poets in the county, I thought it would be interesting to see if we could do something about supporting fiction writers. So I put together a plan for having a fiction contest. The college was nice enough to approve it, and here we are 4 years later. There also is a spring contest for high school students in the county. So if you know high school students who like to write fiction, please let them know about that. We'll be putting out details about that pretty shortly. Okay, so if this were normal times, we would be in a beautiful historic room in Tyler Hall, and there would be flowers, and we'd be a little bit dressed up, and there would be snacks. But these are not entirely normal times, so instead I have my background screen of the lovely gardens at Bucks County Community College, and I hope that you have brought a snack for yourself. Snacking is encouraged. So I need to thank a few people. The Department of Language and Literature has been a very helpful sponsor and supporter of this contest. Dean Nicole Tracy has been very supportive, and our office wizards, Donna and Rose, do tons of the heavy lifting. I totally couldn't do it without them. You are here and know about this because of our excellent PR and marketing department. And you are seeing this because of our delightful technical people who are with us as well. So my thanks to all of them. So I think I'm going to move now into chatting with Barbara Beck a little bit about her story. Barbara is from Quakertown. Her story is called A Little Ghost Story. Barbara, we chatted a little bit earlier about the role that writing plays in your life. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, actually, it's surprising. This is actually the first story I ever wrote to completion and submitted in a contest. So I hope it's not beginner's luck, and that this will continue. It very much validated my thinking around writing. So I was really, really thrilled when I found out that I won. I've been writing on and off, like op-eds for newspapers or little short articles for newsletters and things like this, but I never seriously undertook it. Now that I'm retired, I have a lot more time, and one of my objectives in my retired life is really to write more.
Terrific. You shared with me too that this story was inspired by a particular structure. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, yes. A number of years ago, I lived in Plainfield, New Jersey, and there's a section avenue there that has a lot of old Victorian homes. And I was lucky enough to live in one of them. I lived on the main floor and rented the other two floors. But in the story, of course, the owner actually owns the whole house. So, but it inspired me because there's something about ghost stories and old Victorian homes that just kind of go together.
So when in your life do you fit writing in? Are you a morning writer, an evening writer?
I really tend to be a morning person. However, having said that, for this story, I wrote an hour or so every night at the end of the day, but I always made sure before I did that to kind of meditate and just kind of calm down and just get all the day's excitement out of the way and just energize creativity.
Oh, great. That's a great strategy. That sounds like something really wonderful for folks to try.
Mm.
I wonder if I could ask Kylie to jump in and talk a little bit about what she liked about Barbara's story.
Absolutely. And this is such a treat to hear the origins of it. I love that it was inspired by a structure. I think locations and buildings really inspire my writing as well. And so that's really amazing. There was a lot working here. And well, first of all, I'm a lifelong fan of ghost stories and horror. And so I was thrilled that this short story really gave into the promise of its premise from the very beginning, from the title. You already are set up so well. There's a really classic frame prelude, which I love, which reminds me of, stories like Frankenstein, which nicely sets up the reader to track for little clues that will, of course, make sense later on. And there's a growing tension and that exciting, eerie little glitch that comes when readers and characters come to know that something really isn't quite right going on here. And there's this omniscient and knowing third person, which was really interesting, that kind of drops in and out in very specific places, and has a strong take on this tale that becomes a little bit cautionary. And so, yeah, this story was a delightful fable that should be read preferably by candlelight or flashlight at night.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Barbara, would you like to jump in and read your section of your story?
Sure. Let me just give everyone a bit of context because I'm not starting from the beginning. I'm starting from the point where Amy, who is the main character, she's just gone through a very difficult divorce and she wants a new start in her life. So she finds this old house that she just fell in love with, which she bought on impulse, really, because something drew her to it. And there's one particular room that she really loves. It's a beautiful large sitting room that has a large mirror. And as she sits to face the mirror, the reflection is a wall of windows with a garden beyond it. So it's just, that's her dream. So the story, the reading starts after she has just moved in. Okay. Several weeks passed quickly. Amy's days were filled with well-wishers and new neighbors, all eager to see what the house looked like under her design touches. She had done an incredible amount of work in a short period of time, and while you could never describe the house as cozy, it had a warm and welcoming feel about it. She deserved congratulations and she relished compliments. She relished them so much, she decided to host a cocktail hour the following evening so she could hear more. While she didn't readily admit it to herself, receiving compliments was a core need, and there were times she would find herself doing things just to receive them. It was a shallow trait that she didn't see in herself and was one vanity among the many she had. The wine flowed the next evening, as did the small talk. Amy's favorite room was the sitting room with the large windows, and so that was where the gathering was held. Voices echoed off the walls and the high ceilings, making everything sound so much louder. Amy, I just have to tell you what a wonderful job you did with this place, said Jane. It looks classically elegant, yet not overdone. I agree, chimed Laurie, and I can't believe how much you accomplished in such a short time. You must have had help. No, ladies, replied Amy. I really did do it all by myself. Of course, I had some help moving the furniture around to my liking, but that's really it. She smiled blissfully. And the mirror, Amy, was that part of the house or did you buy that? Commented Laurie. It's absolutely stunning. I don't think I ever saw one that large. It really defines the room, although did you notice there appears to be a flaw in it? No, where? Said Amy. Look here, noted Laurie, as she pointed to a section of the mirror that appeared to have a fuzzy, hazy, bluish patch, a distortion of some kind. It looked like that section was slightly out of focus. It wasn't a large area, yet it was noticeable. Huh, no, I didn't notice that, but I'll have it checked out, said Amy. The mirror came with the house, and apparently it's been part of the house since around the 1930s. In a matter of speaking, it has seen a lot in those years. Thanks for pointing it out, Laurie. The guests finally left around 10 p.m., yet Amy wasn't ready for bed yet. She wanted to unwind, perhaps read a bit. She headed for the sitting room and grabbed Vanity Fair off the kitchen counter as she made her way there. She turned off some of the lights in the room so that only the lamp by the sofa was still on, and then she curled up and started to read. Occasionally, she glanced up at the mirror and noticed how different it looked at night without the distraction of the gardens. It was all black now. She lowered her head and continued reading, but then looked up in a start. In the mirror, the area that looked a bit hazy earlier on was larger now, much larger. And it seemed to be positioned right behind the sofa, right behind her. Surely it didn't change, did it? She thought. It was larger than she really had to check this out. If it was larger, she really had to check this out. She would get it sorted tomorrow. The next day and the day after that passed in a flurry of activities, and Amy never got around to inspecting the mirror more closely. It was only when she was in the room later that evening that she remembered and went over to the mirror. That's odd, she thought. Not only was that floor larger, but it began to have a recognizable shape to it. She moved back to the sofa and sat down to get a different perspective. That's really odd, she murmured. The shape positioned behind her had a human form. It was hazy, yet it looked distinctly like a person without the detail, just a silhouette. She started to get that tingly feeling up the back of her neck and decided it was probably time to go to bed and come back when it was daylight. Her imagination was beginning to take over, and so she convinced herself that this was all a play of the lighting. It would all look different tomorrow, she hoped. Her sleep was restless, and she woke up many times that night. Each time she woke, Amy found herself wanting to go downstairs, indeed drawn to go downstairs and look into that mirror again, yet afraid of what she might see. Was it her imagination, or was there really a figure standing behind her in that reflection? She thought. A chill came over her, and she threw the blanket over her head and buried herself deeply in the warmth of the comforter. Like a child, she hoped that if she wasn't seen, all things would go away. She just couldn't get that image out of her mind. It wasn't much later that her eyes opened with a jolt. She was sure she heard someone whisper her name. Frozen, she listened and heard it again, although it didn't sound like it came from anywhere in the room. It was a woman's voice, a young woman, she thought. Yet where was it coming from? Fear welled up, and she started to imagine all those childhood nightmares coming to life at the same time. Was the disembodied voice coming from under her bed, in the closet, in the bathroom? Shaking, she reached for the light, thinking all the while that something would grab her arm before she managed to turn on the light. The click of the lamp brought a brief moment of comfort as light warmed the room and made everything scary seem tame. But just for a moment. The voice, the whispers were still there. Amy, Amy, I'm here for you, she heard. Amy, where are you? Amy, I'm here for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who would like to hear how the story ends, we hope to post these on our website with the author's permission later on. So if you want to see what happens with Amy, you can check back at the Bucks County Community College website.
Well
Thank
done.
you, Barbara.
Thank you.
I'm going to chat a little bit now with Joe O'Kane of Richboro, who came in second for his story All the Way Home. Just as Barbara was inspired by a building, Joe said you said you were inspired by a geographical location. I wonder if you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Actually, where I grew up as a young boy in North Philadelphia, it was a blue-collar working class neighborhood, and we had an abundance of young fellows with not a lot to do except get into trouble or cause trouble for one another on the different corners. Most of them were good Catholic boys going to good Catholic high schools, but they were just full of impish thoughts and trouble. And one of the main things of interest to us was growing up was chasing girls and playing sports and singing doo-wop on the corners when you had a chance. So that was all part and parcel of my youth in North Philadelphia. And it kind of led me to want to write short stories about growing up in that section of the city back in the late 50s. And so that brought me to this. It's actually going to be a full novel one day, I hope, after I do several more of the vignettes and put them all together. My work usually runs to writing novels, fictional novels. So this is kind of a departure for me.
Okay. I know that you're very interested in the whole coming of age idea, and that's something that you've worked with before.
Yes, as a matter of fact, on the novel that I have that has been published, I mentioned to you earlier, it's a novel set in the Second World War in Italy, but it starts young men going off to war, being drafted during the Second World War and coming from diverse backgrounds and coming together and forming a brotherhood between themselves. And it's they're young and really don't have much to talk about in the world, to offer anything at this point in time. And they grow together and suffer the hardships together. And in some cases, they fail miserably and have to seek redemption. And in others, they prove to be much stronger than they ever thought they were. And it's about that and the young ladies they meet along the way. That's basically what the story is about.
Okay. I'm going to ask Kylie to tell us about what kind of worked for her and what bubbled up for her in your story. But first, Joe, there is, I think, some music behind you or something going on. I wonder if, sorry. That's better. That's much better. I just want us to be able to hear your story when you're reading.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This story was really lovely, and it's a nice thing when you hear that a story has bigger plans of becoming a novel. So many of my favorite novels started out as short stories, or sometimes I discover a character in a story that I think I want to spend a little bit more time with this person, so that makes so much sense from the story. I feel that voice and style are always really vital to storytelling, and that's really paramount with first-person narration. You have to have a really strong voice to carry you through, especially with shorts. And the voice point of view in the story and all the way really make themselves known from the very first sentence, and they do not let up. This is one of those stories that's read almost as if it's being directly overheard, like you're being plopped into a place and you get to observe like a fly on the wall. The prose is really refreshingly human, and it's really natural in its language and its word choice, and most importantly, in its depiction of adolescent angst. This is a story that intentionally and carefully winks at its reader, and I really admired the spirit and the playful articulation. And now, knowing a little bit about your history, it makes so much sense that you know these people. You probably met them at one point or another. And so, yeah, this was a really lovely story, and I love that it took place in Philadelphia.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, if you'd like to jump in, we will give you a graphic that hopefully illustrates your story a little bit.
Okay. I was almost 14 when I realized beyond any question that I was not God. The knowledge could not have come at a worse possible time. I was scheduled for a no-holds-barred fist fight the first moment Moon Mulroy set eyes on me. Now, not being God is not in and of itself so bad once you accept the fact. However, not being God and having the threat of impending death hanging over you in the person of the meanest son of a dog in the free world does pose definite problems. Actually, I had even begun to doubt my godliness a few weeks earlier, when for the first time in my life, I could not con my mother out of $5 for movie money. And as if this was not bad enough, I was just out of house arrest for 1 week for screwing up on my math test and for being out 1 hour after curfew. Try as I might, and I tried mightily, I could not convince my father that I had to stay and finish out the card game Saturday night at Derry's house because I was hot as a $3 pistol. As for the test score, well, that was a different game altogether. I figured I could lie my ass off and get away with it, or just keep on forgetting to bring the note from my teacher home for my parents' signature. I had not counted on that miserable son of a bitch brother Cattlemeyer being of such low character as to doubt the word of a clean-cut, all-American, chubby-cheeked guy like me. I was wrong. He had taken the time to call my folks, and I paid the price, nearly with my life. All told, though, I couldn't really pitch too much of a bitch, fearing as I did the chance that my folks and Cattlemeyer, and even perhaps Brother Schmitty, might get into a much heavier dialogue. If this happened, I was doomed. It would only be a matter of minutes before I would be done in once they discovered I had cleverly changed my report card grades for both their classes, not to mention 3 of the remaining 4 classes I had that semester. I felt that even my most eloquent position statement that none of them really appreciated my true worth to the class, but had reduced the whole course to a crass, meaningless numbers game would not save me from a beating of Homeric proportions. Further, I had to keep a tight lip about the ridiculous curfew situation, since drawing attention to it could wind up with my mother calling Derry's mother and finding out that neither of us were at his house. Then I knew in my heart of hearts it would be all over. There was no way I could admit that Derry and I were at the house of a certain Mrs. Bigsby, for whom 2 high school juniors of 16 plus years were babysitting, and to whom Derry and I had lied convincingly enough to convince them we were both 17 years old and seniors at Boys Catholic High. What, you might ask, has any of this to do with being or not being God? To which I would reply logically that if I was God, I would certainly not let the situation get so out of hand, or my ass in such a god-awful sling. The final insult was the girl on whom I had spent the better part of Saturday night attempting to relieve of her very padded brow, only to discover she was flatter than I was, had told her brother I was her new boyfriend. That was what clinched absolutely that I was not he who is. Her brother turned out to be this self-same Moon Mulroy, a 200-pound linebacker and co-captain of the football, wrestling, and ass-kicking teams at Catholic High. He naturally came looking to size up his kid sister's new flame and lay down the laws of acceptable behavior. It tickled him not at all to discover, to the ridiculing snickers of several of his fellow ass-kicking team members, that his sister had been jived by a lowly 10th grader, and even worse, a second-team player on the JV football team. His sister's shame was his by proxy, and he was going to address it forthwith by caving my face in the moment he caught up with me. There you have it. Small wonder that I peeked out my front door so cautiously. I must have resembled a mouse peeking from a hole rather than a youth who has just resolved that he was merely mortal. Durry's car was nowhere in sight. I had already figured the rat-finked son of a bitch to leave me out to dry despite his promise to drive me to school, so I could at least scurry to the comparative safety of the classroom before Mulroy caught me and obliterated my existence. What I would do for the rest of the day and at football practice, and then for the rest of my life, had not been thought out yet. I knew my parents would not let me transfer to another school, preferably at the other end of the world, nor was there much chance that a stray airplane would fall on Mulroy's head and solve my problems. About then, Durry's car swung into view as it rounded the corner and pulled up to a stop in front of my house. I dashed to the car, which pulled quickly away from my house, and mentally made a note to question Durry at some later time as to the logic behind the ridiculous stuck-on mustache and oversized glasses he was wearing. All he needed were ringlets, and he would have made a great Hasidic merchant. Actually, I knew it was his subtle way of saying it was not safe to be seen in my company, but I would not give him the chance to whine by commenting on it. Once we hit school, I jumped out of his car at the back of the building, skirted the main hall, got to my locker, grabbed my books, and only felt my heartbeat slow a bit when I was safely in my seat in Brother Mac's homeroom. I fidgeted my way clean through homeroom in English, which also took place in Brother Mac's room. At the end of class, I hung back, letting the other guys charge from the classroom in typical stampede fashion. I figured I could walk to my next class with Brother Mac, who I knew always hit the head at the end of the hall near my next class. Brother Mac was a brick, and that's a B, and was not a hell of a lot older than the seniors, and in fact, looked more like a teenager in a borrowed cassock than a Jesuit brother. He was a confidant to most of the guys because he smoked and cursed, and I really do believe he still thought about girls, because even though he turned red as hell when us guys talked about tail in the boys' room, he never made a beeline for the door. Well, I figured this was pretty cunning on my part till I got to the door of my next class. And Brother Max smiled at me, a bit cynically, I thought, and said that it was a pretty good move on my part, but he wondered what I was going to do for the rest of the day. I yelped in surprise, and he assured me that everyone in the school was taking bets and giving odds that Mulroy would hammer me by day's end. So much for clandestine moves. The whole world of Catholic High knew of my problem, and I was sure that any chance of mercy flew out the window with this general knowledge. Now Mulroy would have to make an absolute example of me. As Brother Mac had added with a cheery smile when we parted company, "Hamill, you're dead meat." By lunch, my nerves were as raw as a sandpapered ass. I had ducked and dodged through 3 classroom changes, expecting at any moment I would skulk past the doorway and feel the coarse fingers of Mulroy's hands close around my throat, to be quickly followed by my exit from this vale of tears. That's it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Our last writer this evening is Matthew Omer of Langhorne. We chatted a bit this morning. Matthew, you are one of those folks who these days is working from home, and you have a spouse working from home, and you have 2 children who are going to school from home, and yet you are being able to write. So why don't you tell us how you're working that out?
Sure. Well, who says I'm working it out? Yes, I work from home, and my 9th grade English teacher is now teaching her students in the room next to mine. And my 4th grader and 1st grader are doing online learning downstairs. So that's fun. And in terms of finding time to write, I try to steal time wherever I can. So my girls are now old enough, they can shower themselves. So I go, okay, that's 10 minutes at night where I can get this thought down because they're showering. Oh, now they're yelling at each other. Okay, that thought is gone. But my biggest chunk of writing time now occurs on one weekend a week. My wife and I have this deal where, let's say Saturday is the day that I'll get up in the morning. So one of our kids wakes up at 7. I get up with them, feed them, play with them, whatever, while my wife gets to sleep in, watch Grey's Anatomy, whatever she wants to do. And then the next day, she wakes up with them, and I get to do whatever I want, which ends up being 3 uninterrupted hours of writing.
That's
So
a nice
works
chunk
out.
of time. That's great. Um, we also chatted a little bit about the fact that you're interested in other cultures and your story is set in a very different culture. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yes, I'm decidedly not like my main character, who is from Vietnam. And the story came about because I saw a news story several years ago about the rhinoceros becoming on the brink of extinction because of poaching, and learned that there's a black market in Asia that operates like the drug business, but for rhinoceros horns. And at the time, I was working for a company with offices all over the world and had colleagues I was friendly with in Vietnam. So I asked them about this, and they said, oh, yeah, this is a huge thing. Told me all these stories about these supernatural perceptions of rhinoceros horns. And I was fascinated and horrified by what was going on and thought, I have to write this. And originally I envisioned it as an epic novel that told all perspectives involved, but I got more responsibilities at work and more responsibilities with family, and I was working on a different book at the time. And yet I would see new stories of another rhinoceros has been killed with its horn missing. Now there are 2 white rhinos left in the world. And I thought, no, this story has to be told, or I have it in me that I feel like I want to get this out. And I came up with a way to tell it through one perspective in a short story form. And I focused entirely on that. And then this contest came about, and now I'm able to share the idea of rhinoceros poaching.
Okay. Why don't you share with us what you've got, and I'll switch the picture to something more appropriate for you, and we're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. So like Barbara, I don't start at the beginning. So I will give a little precursor of Lee Trang, the spoiled, unaccomplished son of the richest man in Vietnam, thinks the only way to cure his mother's inoperable brain tumor is with an ancient remedy involving the horn of a rhinoceros. When his supplier is stopped by an eco-terrorist group called the Conservationist Army, he decides to finally channel the unrelenting will of his revered family and take matters into his own hands, attempting to obtain the ingredient straight from its source. So I'll pick it up from there. The mission begins with a private jet and then personal escort to a wildlife sanctuary in Assam, India. In Trang's backpack waits a tranquilizer gun, an electric saw, and plastic gloves. Leaving his security detail behind, he scours kilometers of preserved territory for one of the last rhinoceroses in all of Asia. The sun burns hot on his neck. When he spots a large animal in the distance, he nearly vomits. Is he up for this, the taking of an innocent life? Too many times he accompanied his father on big game hunts, tigers and giraffes and even elephants, hating every vicious moment of it. But that was for sport, death for the sake of it. This time, he'll be saving the most important life in Vietnam. All he needs is the mystical healing property stored within a rhinoceros horn. And so, crouched, concealed within thick brush, backpack threatening to drag him down, he moves closer, small, careful steps. The animal stands in profile, stout horn piercing the sky. Closer. Trang runs his hands through his hair and they come away wet. He adjusts the straps on his pack, takes another crouched step, and parts a curtain of tall grass. The animal turns its head toward Trang. As its face comes into view, its horn seems to split into 2 separate horns, curving upward from its temples, like a demon, like an omen, like a water buffalo. Trang sighs in disappointment and relief. The buffalo stares at him, chewing. Its horns are worthless. Yah! Trang yells. The buffalo stares and chews. Its tail swats lazily. Yah! Trang repeats with less verve and sits against the ground and wipes an arm across his forehead. His legs ache. His skin itches. Taking in the endless expanse of nature, he could easily convince himself he's the last man on earth. Until something crunches the grass behind him, and then a gun barrel presses against the back of his head. His last thought is that he failed his mother. Except he doesn't die. A voice as gruff as rhino hide spits, "You're too late." There's a pause. Wind howls through the brush. Trang tries to lick his lips and his tongue is sandpaper. "You're here for Prisha, right?" the gruff voice says in English. "Well, you're too late. Someone already got her." The wind is hot. The muzzle of the gun is cold. Who's Prisha? The last remnant of the dinosaurs, the majestic cross between a hippopotamus and a unicorn. My best friend. The wind is all that answers. Trang's arms tremble. He very slowly turns around. His captor wears tan camouflage with a face painted tan, with a single line of damp skin streaking the paint below his right eye. The assault rifle in his hands wavers slightly. Trang tries to swallow, but his sandpaper tongue lodges in his throat. A mosquito buzzes past. He very slowly moves his arm, taps the expensive DSLR camera slung around his neck, stutters in accented English. "I'm here to photograph the rhinoceros." The man in tan collapses into sobs. Trang remains seated, hands in the air, glancing around. "You okay?" The man's face paint drips fat brown tears onto the white CA stitched into his Kevlar vest. "I had one job," he moans, "and I failed." Trang nods in shared culpability. His chest sinks from the weight of a lifetime as an ungrateful son. "She's dying," the man wails, "and I can't save her." Trang chokes on the accuracy of these words. Hearing a stranger with a gun voice the phrase he flew 7,000 kilometers to deny stirs tears of his own. The man in tan paws at his cheeks. "So," he steps toward Trang, "we are brothers in grief?" He holds out a hand. Trang flinches, but the man says, "Brother, I share your sorrow." Their red eyes meet, their hands meet. The man hauls Trang to his feet and snatches him in meaty arms, squeezing him, squeezing his pain. Trang has waited his whole life to feel accepted. He doesn't want this stranger to let go. Eventually, the man leads Trang to a colossus of gray lying on her side, chest barely rising or falling, faint snorts stirring the tall grass. A black cloud of insects hovers above in mournful humming. The top of Prisha's head shines as a misshapen hunk of pink. "This is what they do," the man says. "To get the horn, they take the scalp, but leave the animal to die." Trang's backpack grows heavier. "Do you know that a kilogram of rhino horn powder can fetch $100,000? The man asks. "More valuable than its weight in gold, maybe more even than cocaine." He adjusts the assault rifle slung over his broad shoulder. The beast moans, and it could be the roar of a dinosaur, warning its kind that the moment of extinction has arrived. They think it has magical healing powers, that ingesting the powder of a rhino horn can cure cancer. Trang grimaces as if punched in the stomach. "I know," the man scoffs. "Have you ever heard anything more absurd?" Trang says nothing. He squints his eyes against the wind and the sun, and he studies the dying behemoth. She is beautiful, the way her gray skin folds upon itself to form a single flowing suit of armor, a natural bulletproof vest that still couldn't protect her. The black insects swirl around her as a halo. We've talked about legalizing it, of course, farming the horns. They grow back, did you know that? We could remove the horns humanely and they'd grow back every few years. And then maybe the poachers would leave the animals alone. I don't know. One of Prisha's large eyes blinks at Trang, a single perfect onyx glowing in the sun, pleading with him, asking him why. Her gaping nostrils flare and her square mouth hangs askew. Everything above her snout is gone, a cap of gore flattened against her skull. The large black eye blinks again. Trang sees intelligence within and sorrow. She has been carrying the weight of her family, the last of her kind. Of course, the joke's on them, really, the man says. Is this whole endeavor a joke? Trang's newfound resolution built upon a lie? Could it be true? A rhinoceros horn is as curative as a water buffalo's? What is the joke, he asks. We poisoned the horn. It doesn't affect the animal, but anyone who takes that powder will die. The man's scowl smears his face paint into the visage of a demon. Spread the word, brother. The horn trade is death. God blows his hot breath at them. Prisha the rhinoceros lies silent. Trang waits for the man to laugh. The man does not laugh. His eyes blaze white through the smeared face paint. He moves closer, and a cold shadow seeps across Trang. And that, Elizabeth, is my time.
Thank you very much, Matthew. That was beautifully read.
No, thank you.
So the next, I'm supposed to stop sharing now. Okay. So the next portion of our program tonight is a presentation by our final judge, Kylie Reed. Kylie, I should give you a proper introduction. Kylie's 2019 novel, which is not showing up. There it is. Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. I'm sorry, I tried. Oh, wait, there it is. There we go. Okay. Was a New York Times bestseller and was longlisted for the 2020 Booker Prize. Kylie lives in Philadelphia, so she is our neighbor. So we are especially delighted to have her with us tonight. Thank you very much, Kylie, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really lovely, and I jumped at the opportunity. I love reading new work so much. It sounds very trite, but this is really where I feel the magic happens, and it's where you gain the confidence and the hope and the drive to continue. So thank you very, very much for having me and for sharing your work. I want to talk a little bit about my experience with contests and applying to things and lots of rejection. So I've been writing since I was very, very little, as I'm sure many people here have, always filling up notebooks. But I really thought that it was just a hobby. It was something that I did just for me, and that was it. So when I was 23 years old, I was living in New York City, and I took a writing class at Gotham Writers Workshop. And a teacher told me, I think you might be good at this. And so that was kind of all I needed to try and be really good at this for the next, so far, 10 years. In the next 3 years, I was working as a receptionist. So much, as we talked about with Matthew too, is so much of writing is fitting it into your other life and making it work around things that pay the bills. And so I was a receptionist for 3 years. And when I wasn't working, I was writing a very bad novel that will never see the light of day. And I was also writing short stories. I was applying to graduate school, and I was submitting them. I was submitting them to contests. I would go home probably 3 days a week, and I would sit in front of my TV and kind of have something on in the background. Well, I would go on duotrope.com, which I checked is still working. And I would just find some literary journals that I felt fit with my style and with my writing. And I would submit around 5 to 7 stories a week to literary journals and to contests. I had an Excel sheet where I wrote down all of my submissions, when I submitted them, if they paid anything, what their fees were. And the last column on my chart, on my Excel, said their response. And I'm going to say for maybe 10 months, that section was rejection, rejection, no response, rejection, rejection, no response, no response. So I did not have Barbara's amazing, fortune of the first time submitting. I thought, oh man, this is never going to happen for me. And it was hard. It's not easy getting those rejections while you're at your other job and just feeling like, am I sending these out into oblivion? What can I do better? And sometimes I would take a week off when I was feeling a little bit more, downtrodden. And sometimes in the better weeks, I would say, I think I have a new idea. And that would just carry me and say, let me see if I can try. Let me try one more time. I remember my very first acceptance to a literary mag called Corium, which I checked, and they're no longer working, but they were really good to me. They wrote back and they said, we'd love to publish your flash fiction. I screamed. I called my boyfriend, who's now my husband. I had a roommate at the time. I was 28, she was 21. And I remember her saying to me, oh my God, can I buy some champagne for you? Because I've never bought champagne before and I'd really love to buy champagne. And so we bought champagne and it was wonderful. It was a tiny publication. It paid nothing, but it was the boost that I needed. And it really, really carried me through and thinking, okay, I did it once before, I can do it again, which is really, as a writer, all you can ask for. So on my own, I think that I tried to do a little calculation. I think I've submitted around 175 times. I've received at least 100 rejections, a lot of no responses, or sometimes the magazine just folded, or sometimes they just didn't respond altogether. I've won exactly one contest. I won a contest when I was living in Arkansas while I was applying to graduate school, and it was a short story called P. Lawson, and it was accepted at Sarah Lawrence's Lit Journal. And I remember it paid $80, and I was so broke, and I took that $80 and I went and cashed it, and I went and bought contact lenses so I could see and do it again. That was my first short story, and it meant the world to me that that I could have a little spending money and put something back into this passion of mine that I really wanted to make a career. So I can honestly say that submitting to literary journals and contests did make me a better writer. Sometimes submitting something made me say, okay, this isn't getting accepted anywhere. What's wrong with this story? Let me fix it. Who can I ask? Who can I bring this to? How can I reshape the story and make it the best thing that it can be? And sometimes when I would submit and someone wouldn't accept something, I would say, they're crazy. This story is really good. I'm going to try again. I'm going to find it a home somewhere else. So there was something about submitting my work and sharing my work that made me look at it with a more objective eye and understand, like, no, I really feel the spirit of this is what I want, or I really think this one can be better. How can I get it there? It gave me a tough skin. Being a writer is not easy, and there are a lot of rejections and no's, and it gave me really good practice at receiving those no's and moving on to the work and really gently bringing my hand back to the page. And it also really convinced me that writing was what I wanted to do. I wanted to share my art. I didn't want it to be a hobby anymore, and I wanted to hear more stories like yours here and be a part of that community. And so I got a lot of no's. But sometimes I got what my writer friends and I call a good no, which is when someone writes you back and they say, dear author sometimes, which is crazy. We're so sorry, this isn't a fit. And at the very end, it'll say, but this one came close. And but this came close, I held on to it and I would write it for weeks, just knowing that someone saw something in my writing that I had the power to shape and shift to make more accessible and better for everyone. And that's all writing is. That's what I'm doing now with my second novel. It's just shaping and shifting these things to make it better and better. So my novel has gone on to become a bestseller, and it was longlisted for the Booker Prize, but I swear to you that the contest and prizes in the beginning truly meant just as much to me, because when they were happening, they made me feel like, okay, maybe I could do this. And that's the whole reason that we're here, is to know that other people can see you and your art, and that you can see them in theirs. And of course, when I found out that I was on the New York Times bestseller list, I was very, very excited. But I have to be honest with you and say there was a short story that I've been working on for 5 years that was never getting accepted. It was finally accepted into Playboy, and I was sitting in a Mexican restaurant by myself working on something else. And when I got that email, I had to stand up and go outside and have a little ugly cry, because I was so, so excited. It felt like I was doing the work for those past 5 years, and it was finally paying off within this publication. And so I've had a lot of rejections, a few really big wins, but I can honestly say that contest really shaped who I was as a writer. So to the winners here, I want to say congratulations, not just for your work here today, but for your bravery in sharing your art. That is not easy. It took me so, so long. And the fact that you are doing it now, and the fact that you have plans for the future, is truly a huge part of the process. So that was a huge, scary leap for me. I'm glad that you're taking it now and not later. And it also allows other people like me to start their day with a short story, or to learn about a place that they had never heard about, or to get a little scared, or to hear a young boy, maybe that reminds him of themselves. It really is just giving back to your community in so many ways. So I would say to you, keep writing, keep editing. Editing is huge, probably even bigger than writing. Accept feedback, remember to be flexible, and please just use this as confirmation of your work, and just keep going. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well said. Thank
very
you.
much.
Very
Thank
much.
you very much, Kylie. I want to thank all of you for sharing your work with us and reading tonight, and the folks watching the live stream on YouTube. Thank you for coming along for the ride. Hope you enjoyed the evening. Hope you were able to put the outside world aside for a little bit and have a nice time hearing some good work. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Elizabeth, excuse me.
What?
Dawn wanted to know if you could.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was so nice meeting you.
Good night.
Good night.
Take care.
Bye.